Konnichiwa, and welcome back, hunters. I'm Agent Kara Blackwood, your assigned lead paranormal investigator. Today we're going to dub our hunt a spooky one. It is codenamed Animalistic Frenzy. And let's jump into the case files you see before you. But before we do, make sure you like, subscribe, and hit that noti bell, and even share with your friends. That way you can stay vigilant and help keep the world safe from all the spooky entities out there, or ghostly horrors, if you will. Our case file begins in the city of Chicago, Illinois, where a family of four, a workaholic mother, deadbeat father, and their two teenage children lived quite the chaotic life. They lived in an old historical two-story home off of Main Avenue. The home was an inheritance from the mother's recently deceased grandmother, Jody Forrester. The parents met while the mother was on her very rare vacations in Miami, Florida. And as soon as they laid eyes on each other, it was like fireworks. A whirlwind of romance. She loved how spontaneous that he was. And he let her feel free and let loose after all the time she worked and worked and worked herself to death. Candace Forrester, aged 38 years old, grew up being taught work above all else, and work ethic was a high priority if you wanted to go anywhere in life. Nothing in life was ever truly free without some form of hard work. She was, let's say, around average height, around maybe like 5'6" tall, and had long blonde hair, which usually tied up in a professional looking bun. Kind of like mine. Well, a little bit tighter. Tidier. Candace's parents taught her the inner workings of their company, starting at an early age. The company was an insurance firm that had long-standing success and passed on generation to generation to the next in line. She was very lucky in that sense because she loved the work and took pride, and also was an only child, so the spot was rightfully hers from the gate. No competition whatsoever. And she often was found constantly shadowing her parents out in the firm, earning the nickname Mini Boss by their coworkers. Barely making time to play and was taught to work was far more important above all else, and to protect that livelihood. When her parents retired around the late fall of 2007, she proudly took the job as the head of the company, ready to take on anything. Frank Forrester, on the other hand, aged 35 years old, his childhood was vastly different than Candace's. Some would say polar opposite. He was 5'10" with tan skin and short brunette hair. His passions and ideals leaned more towards fun and enjoying life, spontaneously moving from activity to activity, job to job, never truly finding his calling, but loving the ride and avoiding the most responsibility. Life was easier that way. More fun. Frank could never see himself wanting to work forever or work hard like all those others who made their careers, their whole existence and character. So he drifted through life, scraping by barely, but even struggling didn't cause him worry. Because at the end of the day, he knew he was making the most out of life. When Frank was in between jobs and in Florida, lazing about, he ran into the most beautiful woman he had ever laid eyes on. He was ballsy and approached her asking her on a date right away. They then spent the day together on the beach, and Frank convinced her to elope with him the very next day. The wedding itself was really quick, and it led to Candace getting pregnant with twins soon after. The twins were fraternal, and they decided on the names of Jackie and Thomas, who were born moments apart on August 21st, 2010. Both children grew up acting out and making plans together to misbehave or destroy their toys, being very spoiled little brats. Mostly because their mother was hardly ever around, and their father was found drinking the days away. leaving them with hardly any sort of loving childhood. So they lived their chaotic lives, which soon became even more chaotic that dreadful year of 2024. I am Mr. Gary. May 5th, 2025. Thomas Forrester was having yet another wild party with his classmates at his home. Full of laser lights, loud music, lots of drinking and dancing. You know how it goes. He was just like typical, party. He was going to grab another drink after downing his fifth, no, maybe sixth beer. He could hardly remember at this point. Thomas wobbled his way to the kitchen and stumbled a bit and finally made it. The lasers were dancing wildly everywhere, and for the briefest of moments, he could have sworn he saw the very terrifying, wispy, dark figure with a sort of melted-looking face flash and warble in front of his eyes. At that moment, he panicked so much and screamed loudly, but when he ran towards it with a frying pan that he had tried to grab and to whack it away, the image just vanished out of thin air. Thoroughly spooked, he told his friends about it, to which they laughed and told him he had way too much to drink and may have partied too hard. That he definitely had to be losing it and seeing things. At that moment, his mother and father arrived back home. Dun dun dun! They entered the house, saw the party, and Candace looked absolutely furious. So much so that when Thomas tried to explain what he just witnessed, they just scolded him, grounded him, and said, "Sober up." A couple days later, on May 7th, 2024, Jackie began noticing floating lights when she was making a video of a makeup tutorial for her Facebook page. When she moved her phone around, she still could see them. She shrugged and continued with the makeup. Reaching her eyes, she started with the eyeliner. Attempting to get the perfect winged eyeliner look, she missed and poked her eyeball. Wincing, she pulled back and tried to clear her eye. And after she did, the floating lights seemed to be gone from the screen. Jackie tapped and rubbed at her screen, curious as to what had happened, or thinking it must have been some random smudges. She said things got way more worse after she noticed what we at the lodge have believed to be spirit orbs, which we all know was a definite sign that there was something spooky, possibly paranormal, occurring at the Forrester residence. May 16th, 2024. The whole family reported that when they would least expect it, they could hear static frequencies popping on from their radios and the TV turning on by itself when no one was in the rooms. Candace herself specifically made a witness account of jolting awake to find the TV on full blast sound, and the remote itself was across the room. Way too far from her or her husband to actually hit any buttons. And her husband was still fast asleep. She was slightly spooked and shook Frank awake, worried about it. He chuckled, rubbed his eyes, and told her in a sleepy voice that she was working far too much, and her brain was just addled from the stress. She just needed to go to sleep. Typical gaslighting. That's what that is. He got up and turned off the TV, and they both went back to sleep. When their son spoke up about what he witnessed, Frank and Candace didn't believe him. And soon after that, according to the preliminary testimony of the mother, Candace, it got worse. More frequent and much, much worse. When hanging out and talking around the dinner table, the light would suddenly turn off in the night. The father reported that he heard the microwave turning on by itself, and the radio in the kitchen, even when nobody was in the room. all of these occurrences were ignored or played off as a trick of their minds, which would be a very, very bad mistake on all of their parts, possibly even deadly. June 6th, 2024. There were even more electrical disturbances, lights and electronic equipment flickering wildly. Candace felt like she was going absolutely insane and told Frank to call an electrician to diagnose the issue. It was disturbing all of their sleep, and she could not have that, especially with her workload, and causing all of them to have nightmares, intense nightmares. Frank called an electrician technician, having assumed faulty wiring since it was a pretty old house in the first place. The wiring is always messed up with those. Later, Joe would make note that he was in denial and could have saved himself tens to thousands of dollars in repair fees. Then frequently, when they were trying to sleep or at times they were preoccupied, the radio would still blare, sporadic AM/FM frequencies causing static at unexplainable times. They were all losing more sleep. All the while, their sanity kept on draining and draining until they felt like they were drained completely. The parents knew they couldn't contact local authorities for help. Not when, even to all of them, it sounded unreal, and their family was known around the city to not be very friendly. July 5th, 2024. A hunter in the area overheard the twins complaining about their nightmares in a cafe while getting coffee. The hunter then approached and offered the expertise of the hunter's lodge. Hey, that's us. With the evidence and eyewitness accounts that we see before us, whatever the entity that was here, right at this residence, definitely needed to be sent back to the Vale. And you see, that's where we come in. Oh yeah. With our know-how, professional tools, and go-get-'em attitude, we will hunt this entity down and bring that poor family peace. And this hunt may be dangerous. This hunt may be dangerous, but be advised and ever on your guard that around every corner, this entity could be lurking. It goes back in the history of ancient times, and if you're left alone with it, it will surely devour the whole family until they too become vengeful spirits. Which all the tools that are needed have been provided to you courtesy of the lodge to adequately exercise or gather evidence of their presence. On July 8th, 2024, at approximately 10 p.m., 3 experienced hunters of Equus rank approached the family's farmhouse from their backyard. The family in question was away on a retreat, so they were able to gather what they needed without being discovered, or have any eyewitness accounts of their hunt. That would be pesky little annoyance. We don't want to have to explain to them what's going on. And as described by eyewitness accounts prior, the highest possible paranormal activity appeared to be present in the kitchen or the living room. One male hunter by the name of Bobby carried a video camera and surveyed the kitchen carefully, inspecting every nook and cranny. Now, after some moments of searching, the lights themselves started flickering like crazy. Bobby jumped and then soon found what he was searching for. At long last, he could see that they were first blurry, and then very distinct, solid ghost orbs that were visible through the camera's lens. He loudly proclaimed to the other 2 hunters that were searching the living room for any signs. They too shouted back at him, asking for more details, when suddenly Bobby screamed. All the hunters on site did their research and knew what certain activities could trigger the possible entity. But in their absent-mindedness, they forgot about sound. Poor Bobby suddenly was whooshed backwards with a huge gust of cold, cold air, and felt like cold, ghostly fingers gripping his ankles. His body was dragged swiftly by a very angry presence, down, down, down the stairs of an adjacent door to what seemed like the family's basement, maybe? Bobby flailed wildly, trying to grab at anything as he was being pulled, but to no avail. The other two hunters rushed to help him, but by the time they made it to him, it was already too late. They found his mangled, torn up body at the bottom of the stairs. They swiftly went into action, one checking for a pulse, while the other tried speaking to him. Reports were that he said this: "Bobby, come on! Bobby, can you hear me? Say something! Anything!" After some agonizing moments, a sharp, garbled gasp was heard, and a gravelly voice of Bobby said, "Yeah, I'm good. The dang ghost got the drop on me." His crew radioed in for evac for Bobby, which arrived at approximately 2300 hours. The other two hunters assured him they would be more careful with gathering the last of the evidence, and bid him farewell. The female hunter, Rose Willow, decided, since the kitchen had the highest activity known so far, that she would place the dots projector in the center of the room. The evidence that was recovered seemed to be, in fact, point to the origin point of the room being in that kitchen. She also whispered to the other hunter to be very quiet and only use hand signals. This particular entity seems very sensitive to sound. The other hunter nodded in agreement. It was at that point the lights just began to flick like crazy again, and both hunters froze in unison. Rose had another idea. She had this strategy to take one of their small radios, and they were going to turn it on, then slide it close to the dots projector. Once doing so, they would quickly hurry to hide in a nearby closet and wait. And as they pulled out the radio, they heard what sounded like a door slam. Rose quickly turned on the radio. Static from a radio started buzzing like crazy. Both of the hunters yelled, "Hide! Now!" in unison. They barely make it into the closet, feeling what felt like ice-cold, wispy breath on the backs of their necks. Breath heaving in and out, as the static and now sudden slamming door noises increased. They compose themselves and then lie in wait. The time reads exactly 11:45 p.m. It seems like eternity has passed, but in reality, it was hardly even a moment. Rose pierced through the crack in the closet, and with a flash, the full form of what they were dealing with manifests within the dots in all its gruesome glory. Then, with another flash, it was gone. Rose whispers, "Gotcha," and gives the other hunter a high five. They both exit the closet and radio the lodge that they had gathered the data that they needed. The time is now 12:20. They had their answers, and they could safely extract and provide the lodge with a full report of the incident. The hunters quickly retrieved all their equipment, ensuring they left no trace of their investigation behind, and then left the scene through the back door. No one would even know they were there, and that's how they liked it. Extraction occurred approximately at 0000 hours. Evidence of ghost orbs and dots were gathered on the scene, unveiling the identity of the entity to be a yokai. The hunt was bloody and violent, and it was a close call for one of the poor hunters on scene. But ultimately, they were able to be rid of the ghost. The evidence uncovered was highly, highly valuable to setting this poor family free from its haunting presence. Any hunters out there, or those curious to join the fight, please refer to our Hunter's Guide to the Paranormal for more info on how to survive And for some, exorcise, contain, or elude these entities. Don't rest easy, hunters, for there are many more investigations at large that will need to be taken care of, that will need to be solved and vanquished. Many more poor unfortunate souls are unable to rest easily. Until next time when we convene together in this hunter's cabin, stay safe, protect the innocent, trust your instincts, and remember, the hunt is never done. Happy hunting!